Michael B. Jordan had only meant to stop by for a few minutes, maybe grab a drink and say hi to Marcus, an old friend who'd opened a boutique lifestyle store just outside downtown, a place Michael had quietly helped fund in its early stages without putting his name on anything. The storefront was polished, minimalist, with matte black signage and warm lights glowing through the glass, and it always felt calm inside, serene, curated, expensive in a quiet way. But as he pushed the door open, he immediately noticed something was off. There was no one at the front counter, which wasn't unusual in itself, but the music was turned low, and somewhere toward the back, past a row of folded linen shirts and Japanese incense burners, he could hear raised voices. Just one, actually, male, harsh and tight with frustration. He moved slowly, quietly down the side aisle, avoiding creaky floorboards out of instinct more than caution, and paused near a corner display of leather goods. That's when he saw it. A man in his early 50s, stocky, dressed in sleek dark slacks and a fitted sweater, was leaning over a much older woman, mid-60s at least, who wore the store's pale grey apron over a simple blouse. Her shoulders were slouched and her hands hung limply in front of her, palms curled slightly inward like she wasn't sure what to do with them. The man was snapping at her, words short and biting, and Michael caught enough to understand. Something about pricing tags, about inventory misplaced again, about being too slow and too tired and too old for this kind of retail. His tone wasn't just angry, it was dismissive, contemptuous, like she wasn't a person but a malfunctioning part. Michael's gut tensed. He hadn't expected this. He stood for a moment, invisible, watching, the man unaware of anyone else's presence. There was a pause. The woman murmured something soft and almost apologetic. And then the man's voice rose again, louder this time, edged with a kind of disgust that made something in Michael bristle. And that's when he stepped forward. No scene yet, no confrontation, just a calm, quiet step into the light, as if he were just another customer. The man turned sharply at the motion, startled, and blinked twice before recognition dawned. It was immediate and not pleased. There was no smile, no fan response, no "hey man," just a narrowing of the eyes and a defensive straightening of the shoulders. Michael didn't say anything, not yet. He glanced at the woman, who looked down at the floor, then back at the man, who opened his mouth as if to speak, then stopped. And then something subtle shifted. Something in the atmosphere, like everyone had realized at once, this was no longer just an argument behind closed doors. There was a crackle of tension, the kind that promises something bigger is coming, but not yet, not here, not now. Just a heartbeat held too long, and Michael, still silent, stared at the man like he was trying to decide something. The man stared back, and in that strange stillness, with no one else in sight, and the soft scent of sandalwood in the air, it became clear that what would happen next wouldn't just be about this moment. It would be about what kind of place this really was, and who got to decide that. Michael watched for another second, heart beating slower than usual but heavier, as the older woman shifted her stance slightly, trying to inch away without being obvious about it. And that was what did it. Something about her quiet resignation, the way she didn't even flinch anymore, just took it. The man, now unmistakably the store's director, kept going, voice cracking the air with phrases that landed like slaps. "You're too old for this. We need people who can think quickly, not someone who needs an hour to fold a shirt. I swear, sometimes I wonder how you even got hired." Michael stepped forward, not rushing, not dramatic, just with the kind of measured intent that made people either listen or get nervous. The director didn't register him at first, too absorbed in the belittlement, but when Michael finally said evenly, "That's enough," the man spun around like he'd been yanked backward. For a moment, he looked stunned, and then came the flicker of recognition, followed by an expression that was more annoyed than impressed. Like seeing someone famous was just another disruption. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice sharp, clipped. "This is a private conversation. You need to leave." Michael didn't budge, didn't blink. "If I hear you raise your voice at her again, I'll make sure you're out of here," he said quietly, and the way he said it wasn't theatrical or loud. It was worse than that. It was certain. The director scoffed, almost laughed, then turned toward the back and raised a hand. "Security," he said, loud enough for it to echo past the minimalist walls and neat product displays. Michael stood still. The woman looked up at him for the first time, not with hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something guarded. Two security guys in tight black polos emerged from a back hallway, confused until the director snapped his fingers and said, "Get him out. Now." One of the guards hesitated for half a breath, just enough for everyone to feel it, before walking toward Michael with a blank expression, like this was just protocol. Michael didn't resist. He turned to the woman, nodded once, then walked toward the door on his own, brushing past racks of untouched clothes and curated silence. The guard followed closely behind, not touching him but close enough to make a point. The door shut behind him with a dull finality, like a lid clicking closed on something unfinished. Outside, the sun was beginning to slide down the sky, the glass storefront throwing back his own reflection as he stood there for a beat, absorbing the absurdity of what just happened. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to Marcus's name, and typed a short message. "You need to come by your store." Urgently. No elaboration. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then hit send. Somewhere behind the glass, the store continued functioning as if nothing had happened. Inside, someone reset a product display, someone folded a shirt, and the woman, Michael didn't know her name, was probably back to work already, pretending none of it mattered. But it did. What Michael didn't say, what he couldn't say yet, was that this wasn't going to be left alone. Something had shifted. Not in a headline-grabbing way, not in a social media spectacle, but in a way that would quietly, thoroughly unravel things. The kind of shift that takes its time but hits harder when it lands. And if anyone thought this was over, they were mistaken. You don't forget that kind of tone in a man's voice. You don't forget the way someone folds their hands like they're trying to disappear. And you definitely don't forget being told to leave a store you helped build, just for defending someone who couldn't defend herself. Michael wasn't done. Not by a long shot. This wasn't the story's end, not even close. Michael stood outside the boutique for a long moment after hitting send, watching the flow of people on the sidewalk who had no idea what had just unfolded a few feet from where they walked, oblivious to how thin the walls were between polished retail aesthetics and quiet humiliation. The sun had dipped lower, casting gold across the hood of his parked car, and he leaned against it, trying to stay still even though adrenaline still prickled under his skin. Marcus replied in under 30 seconds, "Be there in 10. That was all, and he was true to his word. A sleek grey coupe pulled up to the curb less than 10 minutes later, and Marcus stepped out, dressed like he always was. Sharp, confident, not flashy, but precise. He looked at Michael without speaking, then nodded once. They both walked back toward the entrance, past the same glass door Michael had been ushered out of not 20 minutes earlier. Inside, the store hadn't changed. Nothing ever really did on the surface. But the shift in atmosphere was immediate when Marcus entered. One of the floor staff noticed him and froze, quickly tapping into her earpiece. By the time they reached the middle of the store, the director had appeared again. His earlier smugness dialed down into something tight and guarded. "Marcus," he started, voice already lined with defense, "this isn't what it looks like." But Marcus held up a hand and pointed toward the back office. "Now." No small talk, no explanations, just a clipped command that ended the conversation. Michael followed him without saying a word, and the director, after a tense pause, complied. The office was small, glass-walled, with a sleek desk and a bank of monitors that fed in from every corner of the store. Marcus walked straight to the system, keyed in a passcode, and brought up the recent footage. "What time?" he asked, eyes never leaving the screen. Michael gave him the exact minute. They scrubbed back and watched, sound and all, as the moment unfolded again, but this time from a cold third-person angle. They saw the woman standing beside a rack, holding a stack of clothing, and the director's body language was unmistakable. Sharp gestures, looming posture, the kind of movement that didn't need words to say, "You don't belong here." But the words came too, crisp through the audio, cutting and impossible to misinterpret. "You're too slow for this. You're not sharp enough. You're holding us back." Michael watched Marcus's jaw clench slightly as the video played, and when it ended, right around the moment Michael stepped into frame, the room was silent. The director shifted awkwardly in place, arms folded, trying to mask nerves with irritation. "She's been messing things up for weeks," he said, too fast. "We've had complaints. I've been patient." Marcus turned to face him fully. "That woman," he said evenly, "worked her way through 2 family deaths in the past year and never asked for time off. She's been with this place since day one. I don't care how slow you think she folds a shirt. What I just saw is a man abusing authority because he thought no one was watching." The director opened his mouth to respond, but Marcus was already shaking his head. "Don't, just don't. I don't want to hear it." Then he looked at Michael and said, "Thank you." Simple, no fanfare. Then he looked back at the director. "Get your things. I don't want to see you in this building again." The director sputtered something under his breath, a protest or a warning, or maybe just a refusal to believe he was being fired by someone who'd once asked him to help build the brand. But Marcus didn't respond again. He stepped aside, allowing space for the man to leave, which he did eventually, with stiff shoulders and quick footsteps. After he was gone, Marcus pulled up another feed and found the woman, still working, straightening a shelf near the back, like none of it had happened. He asked one of the staff to bring her to the office. When she arrived, eyes wary, posture still guarded, Marcus greeted her with warmth and gratitude, explaining what had happened without dramatics. She didn't cry or collapse, or even say much, just nodded slowly and thanked them, voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't about theatrics. It was about dignity. After she left, Michael and Marcus sat in silence for a moment, the office suddenly feeling too small for all the tension it had just absorbed. "You always said this place would reflect your values," Michael said finally, and Marcus nodded. "Yeah. Took me too long to realize someone was dragging them through the mud behind my back." They left the store together a few minutes later, the lights inside dimming as closing time approached. Michael didn't feel triumphant, and he didn't want to. What he felt was something quieter, deeper, a reminder that integrity isn't loud, and that sometimes the smallest, most overlooked people hold the fabric of a place together better than any PR campaign or 5-star review. He didn't say anything else as he got into his car, and Marcus didn't either. But as Michael drove off, he had the distinct sense that this wasn't just about one manager, one argument, or one moment. Something had been corrected. Something small but important. And somewhere down the line, that would matter more than anyone could see now.